Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. I am here as part of the Counterfeit Kit Challenge design team with our first challenge of the month, which is fussy cutting. Now I know fussy cutting isn't everyone's favorite and I do get pretty involved here, so hopefully you'll enjoy this process if you're not a fussy cutter. Let's dive in. All right, I did do most of the fussy cutting off camera. I pulled out my counterfeit kit, which is where I start, but here is where I did the fussy cutting. I had this full sheet of floral paper and I only cut half of it. I will finish up fussy cutting the edges of that previous paper and use it in another project. But here are all the flowers that I got out of that, from big bouquet-like clusters to tiny leaf bits. So I'm going to put all those to use. I did fussy cut a bunch of smaller flowers that I thought I would use on this layout, but I do kind of ditch those along the way. And I think I left a little bit of that footage in there. Now, I usually start my projects with photos and a story in mind, but because this is a fussy cutting challenge, I started with the product and I had to go to my story binder and find the photos that I wanted to use. So this was a little bit of a formal school event for my daughter and her theater group. And so I thought the flowers would make a lovely accompaniment to a formal story. I am going to pull out a more formal scripty alphabet and then another alphabet in a color that I want to use on this layout. Now, a lot of my products aren't going to be the colors that I intended for this story originally, because the theater event, the colors are blue and gold. I am going to use those colors on this layout. They're just not going to be predominant. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is in a little bit of my titling and this scallop paper down here at the bottom. I had thought I wanted to use more florals on this layout, but I needed a subtler pattern so that the fussy cut florals would be able to stand out and hold their own. So I am going to piece together my background from the scallop and that more subtle paper. I originally thought I would use that to be photo matting, and it's going to work in the same way. It's just going to also be the background at the same time. So I will get that trimmed down to 12 by 12 and we can move on with this project. Okay, with everything in place, I've got my photos arranged how I think I'm going to do. I'm going to put my title on top of these other two photos, and I kept one photo to be more of the focal photo. I did start my title with these letters, but the way the scriptiness of this font is, that P sets the baseline of the rest of the line up much higher than the baseline of the other letters. And so I'm going to go with it because you can see me here. I'm trying to fuss around with the letters to see how I can get that P to fit with the baseline of everything else. And it also has to do with connecting up to the other letters. And you'll see me trim off some of these letters and stuff to get them to connect better. So at any rate, I realized that the baseline sitting up higher actually is a good thing, because I have this second word to my title out of those smaller alphabet letters, and I did choose just blue tones to pull in that blue that I mentioned earlier. So I tucked that in under the first part of the title, and then my photos and my title are ready to go, and I can start arranging these photo clusters. I am going to glue some of them down flat. I will pop up edges of some flowers. I will pop up entireties of some flowers. You can see me trimming off bits that are a little too wayward, I guess is a good word for it. Things that aren't as smooth looking as other bits. And often I will find another place to tuck them in there so that they don't go to waste. I did, because the pattern paper has an edge to it, some of the flowers were at the edge of the paper and I fussy cut those out anyway. So I will try to make use of any edges on these flowers or leaves in that same way. I will tuck and hide them, or I will butt them up against the edge of the layout so that they all still work and flow. And I'm going to make a nice, beautiful border to this layout. I am also going to make sure I include some of those florals on other parts of the pictures. And you can see here is one of the flowers that was on a corner of a paper, and it definitely isn't working. So I will just set that one aside and save it for another project in the future, hopefully that I can put it to use on. Because I spent all the time fussy cutting, I want to make sure I get all of those pieces put to use. All right, I've got that upper cluster done and glued on. Now I do have a little bit overhanging the top of my layout, and I am okay with that because when I slide it into a page protector, there's a little bit of space at the top of my album that will prevent that from, bending and warping when I put it on the shelf. And I actually kind of like that little bit of extra where things are hanging over the edge and kind of continuing off the page. And then I realized I needed to add one more smaller cluster to this layout to kind of get that rule of threes going on with all of my florals. I got one big row down there, a medium cluster at the top, and then a small cluster on the right to fill in the rule of threes of design. And then, as you can see here, I've pulled out some extra embellishments. Now, those florals take up a lot of visual space, so I don't want to detract from that too much, but I am going to tuck little bits and pieces here and there. So I have a couple of word strips from various embellishments. A lot of it's Vicky Boutin. There is some Jen Hadfield in there and a couple of other things. And a lot of it's kind of older product. But at any rate, I will tuck in embellishments here and there, mostly in and around the florals, but then you'll see me decorate some of those scallops up later. And that actually is when I was thinking about using those little florals. I thought I would color match them and sprinkle them through the scallop borders, but I didn't like the white edging on them. I think it detracted too much from them blending into the color matching idea. So I did pull out a couple of other embellishments that I wasn't quite sure how to use, but some I eliminate and some I keep. So that's just kind of how the clustering process goes. And this is where I do start kind of zhuzhing up those scallops a little bit with some of that color matching that I had intended. These are little puffy stickers, I think from an older, I think it was Paige Evans. I'm pretty sure it was a Paige Evans collection. And I've had them around for a while and I really like them, but I've been having a hard time using them for whatever reason. And so using these little things has been one of the goals of my counterfeit kit this month. I put in a lot of partial packages of embellishments and things that I haven't used up. So that is my goal, and I am making them work this time around. I'm also including a couple of little puffy, quote unquote, enamel dots, but they're puffy dots instead. And I actually like those. Now, none of this stuff has very good adhesive, even though they're stickers. So I will add extra glue to these things as I go. I think these Doodlebug enamel hearts are the very last bit that I add, and I do find the adhesive on those works pretty well. So luckily they don't need extra adhesive, and I am just tucking in little bits and pieces around to add that last little sprinkling touch of things to this layout. Oh, nope, I realized that I was getting ready to take photos of my layout when I realized that I hadn't gotten the gold on there that I wanted. In the beginning, I mentioned the blue and gold theme, and I had intended all along to do gold splattering on here, and luckily I remembered before I had shut down my filming setup, and I was able to go ahead and do that. So here's a little bit of a close-up look of those gold spatters while they're still wet. And you can see the whole thing in close-up photos as I leave you. I want to say thank you so much for being here and joining me today. I hope you got something useful out of this video. If you like the idea of building scrapbook kits and following through using them up with challenges, go check out the Counterfeit Kit Challenge group. Free, fun, friendly group over there, and great way to use up older supplies. That is it for today, and in fact that is it for this week. So I will be back on Monday with another video for you, and until then, have an artful day.